Hey everybody, Dave Lindbergh in Hong Kong with another episode of the THD Podcast, brought to you by the Alti, the Audio Loudspeaker Technology International. So if you're looking to network with a good organization with different technologies and manufacturers, we encourage that you go check that out and see if it works for you. And today we have a guest, Matt Engstrom, coming in from Niles, Illinois, and he's working with Shure. So today we're going to talk about some things about microphones. Things become very popular in the last year of this pandemic, so we're going to find out what makes them good and such. So joining us as always, our co-host in Japan, Mr. Simon Weston. How you doing today, Simon?
Good, thanks, Dave.
Great. So Matt Engstrom, a senior category director at Shure. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for inviting me. It's great to be here. And thanks to those at Alti who makes this possible.
Yeah, that's awesome. So let's find out what we can about Shure. So let's see here. So the company's been around for quite some time. And, I've always heard the story about how they were the Shure brothers. Were there actually brothers that got this company started?
There were for just a few years in reality. And our 96th birthday is in just a couple of days. It'll be after the airing of this, but April 25th will be our company's 96th anniversary. So Mr. Shure started the company April 25th, 1925, as a radio parts distributor. In 1925, broadcast radio was new. Big assembled boxes were extremely expensive. And he, as a young entrepreneur at the ripe old age of roughly, I think he was in his early 20s, maybe 25 years old, decided that he could put together kits of all the parts needed, and any enterprising young person could buy the kit from him, as he had pieced together everything you would need to build a radio. And so that started the company. And pretty early on, his brother helped him. And it was just for a few years. I think his brother joined after a few years, and that's when they incorporated. So it was incorporated officially as Shure Brothers Incorporated. Well, within a few years of that, the brother left. So it was just Sidney N, Shure, just SN after that. But they kept the name until the year 2000. Mr. Shure had passed a few years prior, but his wife removed the brothers, and it just became Shure Incorporated officially as of about the year 2000 on the 75th anniversary of the company.
Okay. Did you say that Sidney M? So is that where the SM comes from?
It's actually N, Sidney N Shure. Yeah. The SM is no mystery. That's studio microphone.
Okay.
So we can get to that later if you want, but there's a pretty logical reason behind the name and what it meant at the time versus the rest of the products in the catalog. And it was highly a mystery for a long time until we demystified it and said, no, that was literally just the name studio microphone, meant for broadcast studios at the time. It had a more light finish, a matte finish that didn't reflect as much. And so that's where the M came from, the word microphone.
Okay, perfect. I guess let's start with some questions here. So, Shure is a big presence in Illinois, but it's, global audio business these days. So would most of the engineering be coming out of Illinois, or is some of it decentralized? Does it depend on the product? Let's focus on microphones, I guess. Are they all designed in the Chicago area?
Well, it's a great question, Dave. We do engineer all over the world. Microphones in particular, the microphone lab is based at the headquarters in Niles. So a lot, if not all of the development, almost all of it would take place right there. So for manufacturing and for final production, in the plant of production, some of the final development is likely to happen as well, because there's certain processes that would go along with the manufacturing of a microphone. So a lot of the core development, a lot of the math, we like to say, is done in the Niles headquarters, where a lot of the core developers are working, but a certain percentage of it will take place either in any of our plants where we manufacture as well.
Okay, so you might see the core development and then some of the implementation, like, material durability testing or functional testing of like sub-assemblies, and then assemblies would happen at the production facility.
Definitely. Testing happens early and often and throughout the process. And then replicating those tests is also part of it as well. So test equipment is developed as we develop the products. So we take a very thorough approach to it, even down to the piece parts and components. And we're pretty picky when it comes to supply chain, things like consistency and durability and ability to sort things and determine errors before they ever leave the dock and so forth. So a high level of observation goes into each part that's sourced and maintained throughout the life. And then the testing equipment that we use for production purposes is developed as part of the development of the product. So you could say that we sort of develop the entire thing. After a certain point, once a product is conceived, we now transition the entire effort to the ability to manufacture. So it's pretty comprehensive.
Okay, so some of the test jigs and stuff would all be designed by in-house.
Yeah, and heavily replicated. We'll have that testing at the headquarters, but then we'll also have it at the plant of manufacture.
Okay, yeah, that's cool. Now, in terms of being quality control on your component selection, I think the current climate is creating some interesting scenarios with component shortage. I think there's an interesting dichotomy between the component shortage and then the high demand for some of the products that you guys have been shipping lately. I don't know if it's the numbers have been similar, but I've heard like brands like Logitech have been up 50% on their microphones parts or products year over year. And so then the demand on those components and now the component shortage, is there, how are you guys managing with that? Are you got special components that are hard to get, or it's just a struggle like everyone else?
Oh no, there definitely there are components that are a struggle to get. We're seeing unprecedented lead times on some common components. Mm-hmm. These days, the common components in pro audio, our core business, are common components across all electronics now, which has been a trend that has changed for the past couple of decades. 20 years ago, pro audio was a largely analog business when it came to microphones and wireless systems. And so there's been a big conversion to now a majority of it being digital. And those products are pulling from the same natural resources, batteries and piece parts and components and chips and a lot of raw parts. And then constraints on the ability to ship globally. Everybody is feeling the same constraints. So I guess that's one thing we can say is that we're all in it together. Being kind of old as we are and having some of the wisdom, we have done what we can to brace for certain things, but I don't know that any companies have fully been able to brace for these current challenges that we're facing. So we're certainly going to have some work to do.
And further into the testing, are you testing down to the battery and resistors and all the subcomponents? Are you getting right into the detail? Like if you specify perhaps a Japanese part, and the factories in Asia are sometimes famous for swapping out. Are you having everything tested to make sure it's authentic and managing that?
We do everything we can to make certain that all parts are of a known origin. Most everything that we do is following a certain set of principles that says we're working with companies who we monitor them. We have people on site a lot of the time, and we also we do a lot of auditing of product as well. We pull off a significant amount of production just to look at what's under the hood and make sure that it's what we expect it to be. We manufacture a significant portion of the products ourselves. And then for any of the components or sub-assemblies that we might work with other companies on, there's a high degree of involvement in those things. And we tend to form long-term relationships with those types of partners as well, which is good. I think, and in general, the entire state of the industry has improved to the point where it's really possible to get high quality all over the place these days. And there are certain things we do have to watch for, but I think who wins at this point is the end user. We're seeing some really, really great product quality across a lot of our businesses that we're in these days. And so who wins is the end user.
I have a couple of questions, Matt. What are the components of a microphone? Because when you say microphone, it can mean quite a few different things actually, right?
That's a great question, Simon. So we're kind of all in on all aspects of it, from the very thing that captures sound. We'll consider that sort of where the source emanates. So anything like after that is going to have an effect on it, but how it starts out in its audio journey is very important. So there's a few different types of microphones. We specialize in 2 primary types, and we also manufacture a couple other types as well. The primary that we manufacture is dynamic microphones, which is what I'm speaking into right now, MV7, which is the little brother of our legendary SM7. And a dynamic microphone is a perfect accelerometer. The diaphragm itself is made of a thin material. In many cases, it's mylar, which is a super, super thin plastic. And it's not quite as light as the air around it, but it'll move very sympathetically with the vibrations. And then a little wire microphone, a little cable will be attached to it and go through a magnetic system that will capture a little bit of the differences that happen in audio and turn that into a tiny, tiny little electrical signal.
Yep. Is it a coil in a magnet?
Yes.
So it's essentially inverse of a loudspeaker to
it
generate
the exact inverse of a loudspeaker. Yeah. Of most types of the speakers that most you would have in your house, that's a dynamic type of speaker. There's lots of speaker types as well. And so the most common by far the world over is the dynamic, which most headphones are and so forth. So, and they work interchangeably. You can wire a set of headphones to be a microphone, and you can wire a microphone to be a speaker. Right. I admit to having done that on occasion by accident.
Yeah.
So,
well, it's actually a common trick for a mobile DJ that doesn't have a mic. He might use his cans to make it might be pretty muffled, but it works.
Yeah, I've seen that trick too. That's pretty good. Yeah. But yeah, that's exactly right. It's the same fundamental. In fact, there are certain brands, I know of at least one legendary product that I used from a different manufacturer where the cartridge from the microphone and the headphone is the same. The inner engine, and it's because it is that interchangeable. There's differences in the diaphragm and so forth, but the magnetic assembly can be the same. So there's a lot of synergies in that design of microphones and headphones. So, for example, when we ventured into headphones a decade ago, we took into that a lot of knowledge on how dynamic products worked. So that microphone would then perhaps have something called a transformer after it or not. Some microphones do, some microphones do not. Something like our 545, which is the grandfather to the SM57, has a transformer which helps eliminate things like hums and buzzes that you might otherwise pick up, but it also shapes the sound a little bit because what a transformer does is converts one signal to another. Without actually touching, right? It's all through magnetics and magic. So a lot of those products then handed off to what would be called a preamplifier. So dynamics do a really good job at being tough and resilient. And we know a lot about them. We at Shure are very proud that the really first functional dynamic microphone is this one here, the 55. This one came out in 1939. And the brilliance of this thing was that what it used to take 2 capsules together, which was very inconsistent, and you'd have a hard time making 2 sound the same, to get a polar pattern, to get that rejection. Our guy, Ben Bauer, figured out how to really get a good null point in the back of that microphone. And this, as we know, opened up a lot of live sound possibilities. So dynamic has been a product type that we've done very well with for 85 years. The next type, of course, is condenser. Very popular microphone type. You think studio vocals, very rich. And the difference with a condenser is that diaphragm is even thinner. And now we're working on the concept of I guess I could put it in basic terms like static electricity, but a positive and negative on either side of that diaphragm is going to be observed. And the difference between each side becomes that electrical signal. You do need to sort of blast it with power. So you hear the term phantom power, and that's applying a voltage anywhere as little as 8 to 12 volts. More standard in the bigger microphones is 48 volts. Doesn't go above 48. We've had jokes internally about, well, we'll make ours 49 volts, but that's a joke because that doesn't exist. And so a condenser can be a little bit more rich, but it can also be a little bit less forgiving. So in a loud environment, if I was going to be shuffling papers, a dynamic is going to block out or not even hear a lot of that finer detail. A condenser in a well-treated room can sound very accurate, very brilliant, and very rich and lush. A dynamic gets most of the way there, but without a lot of that extra detail that you might not want. So something like an SM7 which is right over my shoulder here, is very popular. And they refer to it as an SM57 on steroids. The legend goes that in the early 70s, the engineers at Shure said, hey, we've done a great job with this SM57 and SM58. So if money was no object, what would you do? And so the SM7 is the descendant of a product called the SM5. The SM5 did not have a housing in it. It was just a foam back and a foam front, and it was suspended, and it was kind of unique at the time, but it wasn't practical in a lot of applications.
So you would have seen that in some radio studios with like an overhead boom, and I remember seeing that.
And it really sort of set a nice tone, but it wasn't very reliable. I think it had a little work to be done. And so this SM7B was the next product that came out. And much like an SM57, extremely durable. It can take a ton of sound, but it lacks the mid-range presence peak that is very common in SM57 and 58. That helps things like snare drum and guitar cabinet and vocal cut right through a mix. In a more controlled environment, such as we're in right now, or a radio broadcast, that mid-range forward isn't necessary, but it's nice to have sort of the option. So at the time they said, well, wouldn't it be great if there was a switch that could turn on that mid-range boost if you want, or flip it off? And so that's what they did for the SM7. They gave it a little switch in the back that said, hey, we can boost that mid-range, or we can have it flat. And then likewise, they gave it a low cut or a high pass filter to roll off the unwanted low end, really helping things like plosives and Ps. So it became this sort of secret weapon. And it really wasn't that great of a selling microphone for a couple decades. And then by the late 90s, its legend began to really grow. And it seemed like the less we did to talk about it, the more people were interested in it. And that wonderful high frequency is very smooth without ever getting really grainy. And that big housing in the back helps vent the back of the cartridge, which really shapes that low end. So it's got this kind of unique low end for a big dynamic. I think a lot of the great hallmark dynamic microphones in the world, of which there's several from several great companies, that great low end is one of the coveted features, combined with that smoothness with that presence peak if you want it. And it's really... it's kind of a marvel. We've always liked it. That's an original SM7, not even a 7A or a 7B. That one right there is probably a little bit over 30 years old.
So that one is a dynamic microphone, and it has the microphone rear, actually has a rear side closed chamber.
Exactly.
Does it have a vent too? Do you vent the rear side of it?
Not the front, not the rear side of it. And there's the vent from the back is actually coupled to the front. And that's part of the beauty of it, because that vent is as much about low frequency shaping as it is about shock mount and reducing some of the vibrations. So it's for sound shaping, and it's as much about sympathetic vibration reduction.
Yeah, interesting. So there's the transducer part of it, which may be a condenser or a dynamic, and you're also building in electronics.
Yes, in many cases there is a circuit board. In this particular microphone, that circuit board is for the presence peak and the low frequency roll off. Sometimes a microphone will have a pad on it, simply to either reduce a little bit of gain in case there's a loud source or something. Condensers, it's much more common to have a circuit after the cartridge. The older the condenser microphone you find, the less circuitry you'll find. The more modern ones, there's a lot of compensation that's done from what the cartridge puts out to what you actually get on the end of it.
So, a common household microphone you plug into your smartphone or PC is just a condenser with a FET in it. That's it, and everything. The amplification is all done in the device smartphone,
and it's microamps.
Yeah, but you're talking about a different category of microphone where it's going to do all of that work by itself. You can't rely on the end device to make a good job of it. Is that fair to say?
Definitely. And there's a lot less trade-offs in the bigger, more formidable thing. In the microphone one, for communications, it's going to have a very limited feature set that's extremely economical, but also reliable for a few very basic tasks. They don't ask too much of it.
Yeah, okay. And back on dynamics, what diameter are we talking about in terms of the diaphragm?
In general, for our portfolio, anywhere from 3/4 to around an inch. They don't go too much smaller or too much bigger. In the market, you can see bigger size. In headphones, obviously, things more like 30 or 40 or even 50 plus millimeters are common. And there are microphones with larger diaphragms as well. The larger surface, you tend to get a little bit less noise because there's that much more surface to grab the sound. But you also encounter different problems, consistency and the uniformity of the diaphragm, because such a thin material, you need it to move up and down in a very uniform way. So there is kind of a sweet spot between frequency response and consistency, I guess.
Yeah. Are all the microphones, is it all targeted for voice or instrument pickup? Is there anything, microphones are not many people know this, but used in industrial applications, for sensing applications. Does Shure get into any products like that?
We don't specifically make them for them, but we are often made aware that our products are used in those types of applications. I think NASA is the most interesting one, where SM57s have been on a number of launches, and really what they're monitoring is vibration, not so much sound. Right. So we've heard about those, but they're able to withstand a lot of SPL before they give up, so to speak, and so they've been mounted on several different outer space explorations, to our knowledge.
Wow. Okay.
So does Shure have a target frequency response, essentially, or sound character? And does that vary from application to application? How does that sort of work out?
Well, that's a great question. And the way that you phrased it, that it may vary from application to application, I think that most of us would say it's along those lines. Yeah. We certainly have a house sound or a philosophy. We've been sort of that front line, meaning that we're the first line of defense for the live show, right? The singer's voice hits our product first, and then it goes to everyone else. So for many years, it was focus on the transducer. And then for the past few decades, nearly 30 years, it's been deliver that wireless signal. Our wireless microphones are, of course, a big part of the business. So we take that front end of the chain very seriously. For nearly 25 years now, we've been doing the isolating in-ear monitor business, which started on the stage. It started for the musicians and the performers, and it's ventured into the consumer business now, where we sell those things and we do headphones and so forth. But our roots really were to deliver the performers' requirements. And so what they need is reality with a little bit of sizzle, right? They want it to sound good, but they also need to be inspired for the performance. So they need the microphone to sound good. They need to hear themselves. It's got to work. It's got to be reliable. So there is that hint of it sounds correct, but it's also got to be in the direction that the end user needs. And that does vary from market to market. Something like a wireless microphone, that should simply be the flawless, handoff of that audio signal from one component to the next. So that's a very objective measurement. For something like a headphone or an earphone, we tune it. But if you listen to the $100 product, it shouldn't sound like a completely alien product to the $1,000 one. There should be some ties that bind those things together. And we're old enough that we realize that we've got a lot of microphones that have small details. Those details account for the big differences. And so watching so many brands come in, again, who wins is the end user, because we're only going to be able to tune within a certain range. These days, things like DSP allow both microphones and earphones and headphones to be tuned however. So our philosophy remains, try to keep it within a relatively consistent boundary, and then let the user really take control of their sound after the fact.
Yeah. And so if somebody buys a Shure mic, they decide they want to copy this. It's not that simple, right? There's a lot more that goes into getting it right rather than just looking at the parts and copying them.
It's kind of painful what we do to develop these products. I mean that with a little bit of a joke, but all seriousness. It takes us longer. We use really, really hand-picked components, and our manufacturing standards are higher. So it's really tough to design and develop a product and then just peg it where other products are in the market, because we didn't do what they did to bring their product to market. We did what we did. And so it's sometimes it works very well, and sometimes it's a little bit more difficult to convince the rest of the company, hey, this one might be worth more. Almost 10 years ago, we launched an earphone that was $1,000. And that one raised quite a few eyebrows in that not everybody was ready for $1,000 earphone. And then about 5 years ago, we launched a $500 microphone called KSM8. And it's a very new microphone, new concept. We got patents on it. Like, who gets patents on microphones? Isn't that old technology? But we did, and it was groundbreaking. And it's the biggest nerd topic ever, so I don't want to bore you with it, but the microphone broke ground. It did things that others didn't do. It wasn't a perfect fit for everyone, but for those who thought it was a good fit, nothing could compare to it. Well, it cost us a ton to manufacture that product. It's got 2 diaphragms in it, and the way that they work in this little patented configuration. So we kind of controversially charged $500, but it ended up being very successful, and the market really liked it. And in a way, we were able to maybe eliminate people who might have otherwise been upset with it. I think the expectation that was because this was a new dynamic vocal microphone, that it would just be simply better than a Beta 58. Well, it's kind of tough to just beat a Beta 58 at being a Beta 58. There's a reason that's been out there for almost 30 years, and that's a great product. And then the SM58, of course, the venerable 55-year-old product. You don't just go beat those products, right? So we didn't set out to beat them. What makes KSM great, KSM8, is something very different. A microphone like this operates on what's called proximity effect. The further away I get from it, the low end is going to decrease at an exponential rate versus the rest of the frequency response. And then the inverse is true. As you get closer to it, the low frequency will gain at a greater rate. This is my frequency range over here. Yeah. The low frequency will gain at a greater rate than the highs as you get closer to it. So this is called proximity effect. It's very common in all cardioid microphones. In particular, cardioid microphones are most susceptible to proximity effect. It's the nature of the design. Omnidirectional microphones, for example, do not suffer from massive proximity effect. There will be a minimal effect, and often that's more of a reflection thing and less the cartridge itself, depending on a variety of factors. Yeah. So what's great about KSM8, I thought I had one back there, I think I do somewhere, but I won't waste time, is the fact that it's got a much reduced proximity effect. The second diaphragm helps control the overall frequency response and the presence peak, and it helps shape also the shock mount, as we talked about that rear venting. So that second diaphragm actually helps the microphone stay uniform as you work your way all around it. So most microphones that you see people singing into live, you see them do what we call eat the grill. They get right up on that grill. They will put it in. This doesn't sound very good, does it? Yeah, like, this is not a phenomenon that's exclusive to any microphone. Anyone that does this isn't going to sound good. So most singers who would like to be heard back off that microphone at the expense of low frequency response, at the expense of the polar pattern. But that's where KSM8 is great. You can back off that microphone and it sounds uniform. You don't lose low frequency response, and you still can have a lot of gain before feedback. So that's kind of a groundbreaking thing that we spent years working on, and the people who liked it loved it. The people who didn't like it said, yeah, but my Beta 58 is better. If I'm running around the stage with cranked floor monitors, the Beta 58 is better. And that's a fact. That's true. And a Formula One car is not good in a dune buggy race, right? They're not designed for the same thing. And so that's kind of where we were with KSM8. It was not designed as a dune buggy. It was designed as a Formula One.
Yeah, I remember the kind of the rule of thumb is you hold like an SM57 and you use your thumb to gauge where how far away the mic is. I remember always the club owners
Dave,
that I worked
I wish people did that. I wish people did that. We should we'll start that campaign again.
But it also sounds like the mic development on your side is a quite a creative process in terms of creative engineering. Like, what problem are we going to solve? Is there a relationship with producers and artists to kind of know what they're looking for? And is that feed into your development process? Absolutely.
We're very, very fortunate to have a long list of really great partners across a lot of industries. Television broadcast, live sound, sports, conferencing. I mean, every audio realm, we've got great contacts. So we were able to that particular microphone, KSM8, had been out on several world tours by the time we actually went public with it. And so we've always got something sort of in the works. A couple of years ago, we came out with a new lavalier microphone called Twinplex. It's also a world's first, a couple patents associated with that. The way that we did that microphone was very different than the way other companies did microphones. We took 2 diaphragms, tiny little condensers on the outside, 2 on, one on each side, but then we put the entire preamp inside, in between them, which meant our assembly could get smaller, and we were able to eliminate a little bit of risk. And so a very highly competitive product, very robust and very durable. But we're able to get this crazy frequency response out of it with super low noise. And it's because we've got all this extra surface by having 2 diaphragms, not 1. And so that was a crazy idea that someone had. And a lot of things sort of start on a napkin and end up being like the coolest things ever. And they might not be like an easy sell early on in the process. So we kind of have to play the long game. I started in 1998, and I'm still kind of a newbie at Shure. So, I think my longest project to date was 8 years from the time someone wrote out the idea on a napkin and we actually shipped it.
Wow.
And that was this crazy. We still ship it, actually. It's called the KSE 1500 system. It's an electrostatic earphone system. It was the first and only of its kind. And it's kind of expensive, so it's not a huge seller, but the people that have bought it really get what it is. And it's the only thing in the world that's like it. But it was 8 years to do it, and it was worth it. The company supported us, and more than once, it was maybe a leaner year than others, right? You're not really working full speed for 8 years. It's sort of an idea that needs time, and a lot of the materials didn't exist. We didn't have materials to make those things, so we had to actually find suppliers who would do these crazy things for us. And that supplier changed their mind. They won't do it. So we would have to work on different things to get some of these crazy materials. The cable on that electrostatic system alone, the cable was about 2 years.
Right.
Finding a vendor who would make something to meet our specification. In an electrostatic earphone, a significant percentage, up to 90% of the amplifier power is gone before it even gets to the earphone,
Right.
because of the nature of the design. So to find someone who could make a cable that would get as much of that signal there and still pass our crazy quality tests, where we really torture our products before we allow them to ship. That was a bunch of years. I had a lot of hair when it started. So that's not true. I didn't.
So also another thing that's kind of in the theme of audio product development now is people using simulation software to design. So, obviously you guys starting way back almost 100 years ago now, it would probably be done with tinkering and trial and error. But now with products like ComSol, are you guys using products like that to simulate what you want before you start building stuff?
At every level, of course. Electrically, that's I think second nature to everyone now. But mechanically, when I started in the 90s, the mechanical simulations were there. Right before we would tool, we would look at weaknesses and potential things, and then that has shifted into the acoustic realm. Things like diaphragms, we can model them out now, and so we do a lot of simulation. A lot of it is still hand math. We've got all the notebooks from the wonderful folks that developed all the products before us. And so our acoustic engineers do pore over those details. But a lot of the business now is on digital products. And that is a much more complex field of work. So simulation is common in everything. We do wireless microphone systems now that are extremely advanced and almost even predictive in their nature, and are able to adapt very quickly to changes in the environment. And that usually starts with a simulation, and someone says, hey, wait a minute, if we do this, we can quadruple our bandwidth or something. And so from components to diaphragm stiffness and rigidity, and even in some of our testing, there's simulation, advanced life cycle testing and things like that. So that's simulation is a big part of it these days. And it like I said, it started very basic in just mechanical things and what that might look like. But these days, I think we continue to add ways. We have invested in a number of robots for our quality testing. So when we do big trade shows around the world, or at least when we were still doing trade shows, we would bring the robots, which simulate a lot of the life testing. And so they would just sort of naturally attract a crowd, this autonomous robot that would just sort of pick up this thing and beat on it, and then it would just 4 days straight, it would just beat on these things. And every time the same people would come and look at it. And simulation is a big part of it, even for a old and, kind of dinosaur company like us.
Okay.
I was curious about one thing. So you mentioned just earlier they had a product that had been shipping for 30 years. It's kind of a different point of view when you have product items that have a lifespan of 30 years. A lot of other consumer electronic stuff is year on year. You have to have a new model, or maybe 2 years, and then it gets retired. So you got any comment about how that is?
It's a balance. This product I'm speaking in with, just a few months ago, we updated the firmware to have moving LEDs when we speak. So we're constantly updating the firmware. I think we just did another firmware this week, and then the app always needs to be updated. We've got a number of app programs, and then this one that I keep here, which 1959 this product came out, the 545, and it's largely the same as it was in 1959 when we came out with it. The challenge for that one becomes maintaining that same spec when the companies that made those components are all out of business and everybody has retired and no one knows what duct tape they used on the tooling to hold it together last time it broke. So there's a completely different challenge in those things. And then at the same time, adapting to the cycle. You don't launch a software product and dismantle the team and go away, which was done with every hardware product we ever did.
Yeah.
The software team, the launch of it is just the beginning. Now we've got a cycle and bug fixes and OS updates and new features and constantly updating. And so, we're extremely excited about those new possibilities because we're able to keep teams together for longer periods of time. And it's been a wonderful chance to bring in people from fields that we had not brought in before. But software is absolutely a driving force behind all of our new products in all of the divisions, especially the conferencing and the wireless microphones.
Is there a part of it that Shure customers become attached to a microphone and they don't want it to change?
Yeah. Yeah, that's true too. There's a page on our website of like people who have tattoos of this, like on their bodies or whatever. So there are certain things that I don't know that we would change anytime soon. But on that topic, we were all extremely attached to our phono cartridge business. And I'm a phono enthusiast. I run a studio and
the 44,
and I record bands.
What was that? Was it the 44?
So we had to discontinue the entire manufacturing of phono. And really, we had been struggling with it for about a decade, where again, all the companies that we had worked with either changed or retired or had been bought or sold or had changed their focus of business. And so many of them kept on to that business much longer than they would have out of loyalty to us and out of some sort of reverence to the past. But it just wasn't sustainable for very long. And so we actually had to make the decision to say, you know what, we're going to bow out now while we can without it because it was already, we couldn't keep up with demand. And then there would be a problem. We'd have to shut the line down, and people depend on it when we say that it's an active product. So we had to do what was best for the business and shut that down, even though no one has more nostalgia for the phono line than me. I record bands who press vinyl now. We those of us at work, we're all musicians and studio folks. And so, CDs came and went, but vinyl is still here. So it really, that hurt, but that was a sign of the business. And so things do change and we do have to stay modern. And that was going to be a disproportionate part of the business that it really couldn't live up to the past hallmarks, to the past, heights that it had achieved, due to our own inability to recreate. The many geniuses who had designed all those products have long since gone. They're even too old to bring back as consultants. And that's not even, I'm not being mean, I'm being serious. I met most of them in the 90s, but they're all gone. So that was a big decision, and that's tough when a legacy like that goes away. But it was better for the business long term, and we got some hate mail when that happened. We had quite a few people tell us they will never buy a Shure product, and all we said was, we hope that the ones who do keep buying our products understand that it's because of our commitment to hold our own quality standards that we couldn't do that. Yes. So if that means we lost their business, we apologize, but we're too committed to maintaining standards that were not possible with that line. So it was very bittersweet.
So I think you kind of touched on something that's kind of the power of legacy. People get stuck on whether it's a Shure stylus on their turntable or SM57. I think that being established gives you guys a lot of power in the market in terms of, like, somebody might come up with a better product, but the sound that people get off an SM57 is preferred by everybody in the music chain, from the producer to the artist. Is that really helps you guys out in the marketplace, I guess? Yeah, I mean, it's our own, we're our own worst enemy. We're our own best benchmark. We got to live up to our own standards. And with that sort of DNA in the fabric of that industry, Levi's 501 jeans, Harley Davidson,
we'll always have to have that appeal. A Fender Strat and a Gibson Les Paul through a Marshall stack is going to kind of have that sound. So that will always be certain. In that regard, what's got more value, a modern Strat or one from 1959? Where's the real value? What's the real competition there? Same thing with Les Pauls and some microphones. So the struggle is to keep it relevant, to pay homage to that which got you there. And in the case of something like 57s and now SM7B, give them what they want. We're not going to stop developing. We've got we're very proud of KSM8. We're very proud of Twinplex. MV7, which is the wonderful balancing of a great acoustic network with some digital capabilities. Can't say too much, but I can definitely say that we've got some exciting things coming as well. So it's a blend of keeping what people want, but also not being satisfied that good enough has been achieved.
Yeah, I was just thinking, like in automotive, in the speaker side of things, we see sound design by Bang Olufsen or by Bowers and Wilkins or Harman in the car. But now microphones with voice-enabled devices is such a huge thing, and it's largely the MEMS guys that are capturing that, but they don't have the brand equity that a Shure does. So I was just always thinking, like, why isn't there like a particular mobile phone with sound design, mic design by Shure, or is that something you guys have explored?
Well, there's got to be the capability for excellence before we really get into it. And we're yet to see that in the mobile phone market just yet. That doesn't mean we're closed off to it existing. And we've got a couple different products that we came out with this year, the Bluetooth headphones, and then the True Wireless product. And so we've certainly got some more releases planned in that space where we're going to try to make it a better experience. One of the key things that we focused on was capturing that voice for the purpose of the conversation. So our Bluetooth headphones, during testing, gave them to my family around the house where I've got a couple teenagers and a spouse. And, their first comment was, well, these are better than the other ones. What is that? And I didn't want to tell them too much, but they, objectively said, well, my voice sounded better. Like so-and-so said I sounded better. Well, good. That means we've done our job there because we should be known as good on that side of it. So that factors in. And these days it's as much knowing how to make good stuff as it is knowing what is good. Because with something like a MEMS, we made the decision a long time ago, we're not going to manufacture those. Those need to be manufactured by the millions per day and be extremely cost effective. Yeah. Our experimentation with that has been, what can you do with this? Not how do you manufacture it? And so a few years ago, we launched a ceiling microphone, like an array type thing called the MXA 910, which has 119 little MEMS microphones in it. And we don't make the MEMS, but we certainly designed everything after them. So it's not just about manufacturing that, it's understanding what it's good at and then leveraging the strengths and finding out how far you can take it. And for that, we're constantly tinkering. I can't show you the panoramic view of my desk, but there's a lot of island of misfit toys and headphones and microphones and things that never were. And that wasn't the case a year ago. It was my desk at the office, but that had to be converted, obviously, a year ago. So now it's here.
It looks like you got a great gear den there.
I don't know that my family thinks so, but I love it. But it's been fun blending the age-old designs, what we know about math. And again, I mean handwritten math, hundreds of pages of math in a notebook that Ben Bauer said, if we do this and this and this, then we can take one microphone, we can make it cardioid, and it'll be extremely consistent and reliable. And it is. It's to this day, the 1939 product is, we still sell the 55. It's a different version than that one, but it does what it says it does. And then taking what you can do with modern manufacturing and modern design. And when I talk about how the customer wins, we make things a certain way without a doubt, but there's a lot of great stuff out there from all brands. And so we have our philosophy, and that, incorporating new technology into that philosophy is awesome. And yet we still marvel at what other companies do when they're not tethered to, reality and history. So like we are so much. So it's a great time to be a part of this market and watching and getting to pick and choose where we, decide to sink our teeth in. There's just some great things. And, I can't wait to see where it goes, quite honestly.
Yeah, no, I think with all this pandemic created a great opportunity for cameras and microphones. And like Simon's been on this journey with me on the podcast, and I've been like spending all my normal travel money on video and audio recording equipment. So I think that's not unique, though. I know that there's a lot of brands or companies out there whether it be Twitter or Salesforce.com employees, and the companies are aiming to build their own kit. So to supply it with their staff and just kind of take a Shure mic and put a sticker on it with a Twitter, and away you go, and you work from home. So the trend is there. I don't think it's going to change.
It really is. And we, again, a number of years back, we got into conferencing products, that MEMS microphone that's meant for, high powered business conferences. And then we've got a couple that are meant to sort of sit on the desk. That whole business is, B2B, where we're talking to AV integrator folks, where they're, the guy that buys it from us is the guy that goes and puts it in at big offices and big corporates and even some government install things. Well, what happened when no one could go into the office?
Yeah.
They all needed to continue to communicate. So of course, Zoom stock went through the roof, but the other, conferencing programs did as well. And then the search for compatible products. So this product here, MV7, we designed this to be the perfect podcasting microphone. We did not design it for what I'm doing right now. It just happens to work for that. So again, a little bit of, finessing and tweaking to make sure that it also fits those applications. Ended up working out very well for us. The timing was great. We already had I think had almost 2 years of work into this product by the time March of 2020 came around.
Yeah.
When we launched it at the end of the year, we were able to make a few changes to the firmware. And so that's hopefully a great sign of things to come for, our agility in reacting. And we've seen some other companies do it very well as well. So we're always kind of watching where the bar is set, and it's very impressive to watch all the progress in this space.
And I forget the model number, but the one with the off-axis pickup, what was that model number again?
That's KSM8.
KSM8. So the fundamentals of that would translate very well to conferencing applications, and even just kind of regular communication, because not everybody sits there diligently right in front of the microphone. So depending on the user, especially with kids, they're wandering around and, perhaps pick them up clearly from wherever they're yelling at the mic from.
Yeah, well, we hear some interesting stories, and I won't tell you all of them, but one good one is one of our key guys that we've been testing with since longer than I've been at Shure, over 30 years. I think he has been a consultant to us. We don't, we test new stuff with him. He does basketball games, football games, baseball games, golf. So he is a pioneer in surround audio for television broadcast. So many years ago, when I had hair, legitimately, he was placing microphones around baseball fields in the US and working on the different processing that would sort of translate to a good surround experience at home. Early Wrigley Field games in the mid 80s and so forth. And so he has been a pioneer. These days, if you listen to a surround broadcast of a game, he's one of a handful of folks in the US who helped really sort of make that sound great at home in a 5.1 system and beyond. And so he still does it. And so when we were working on that lavalier microphone with the 2 diaphragms in it, the Twinplex product, the tiny one, he's beta testing it. Well, we give him stuff. We don't say, do this with it. We just give it to him. So what does he do with it? He sticks it on the backboard on the basketball nets for some basketball games. Now, this is something they do. They stick microphones on there so you can hear the swish, right? That whoosh. And so there's a sound. The same way there's an SM58 sound, and the same way there's a lot of other, like Sony 7506 headphones have a sound. Most of the little lavalier microphones that they use on the backboards have a sound. So when he snuck in one of our prototypes secretly, because it had not been announced yet, Twinplex was not a public product yet, we sort of snuck it in and he's using it. And that first night he sticks it on and he says by the end of the first quarter, he's getting phone calls from some of the network executives saying, "What'd you do to the net?"
Right.
And he's like, "What do you mean?" And they said, "I've never heard the net sound so clear. What did you do?" And so he had to cop to it. He's like, "Well, I got some super secret stuff I can't talk about." And so then they were like, every game, "Did you bring the super secret stuff?" Like they didn't know what it was or who it was from, but they knew that there was a super secret thing. And then the All-Star came around, "Did you bring the super secret stuff?" So they knew that this guy had the in on some stuff, but like he got a call about the sound quality of the swoosh when a ball went through the basket. We thought that was kind of funny.
That's great. All right. Well, that's like a lot of good information for us today. Simon, did you have any more questions?
I think I'm all out. It's really good to hear about it though, Matt. All
right. So Matt Engstrom, thank you so much for joining us here today. Anybody have any questions, just hit the comments below. We'll put some of the social media links to find out what Shure's all up to. And so like, subscribe, share, have a good time on YouTube. So thanks again, everybody, for watching, and have a great day.
Thank you, Dave and Simon, and thanks to everyone at Alti.
Thanks.
Okay.